I'd like to call Ms. Hopkins. Please welcome, ma'am. I'd also like to call Mr. Kamlesh Jain, the Managing Director of Jain Metals. And I would like to call Mr. Jinesh Shah. Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. Please have a seat, sir. All set? All set here? Please have a seat. Okay, so I'm sure we are all good to go ahead now, and we have a fantastic panelist here, speakers here. I have just given a brief about Mr. Devinder Surana. I talked about Ms. Hopkins, I talked about Mr. Kamlesh Jain, and I talked about Mr. Jinesh Shah. So we are going to start a session on copper. I'm sure when we talk about the non-ferrous metals, we just had a session on aluminium, zinc in detail. Mr. Kunal Shah spoke about his outlook, and others also gave their perspective. Here we're going to talk about copper market. I'm sure very, very important commodity at this moment. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome all the participants in the copper session of IMRC 2025. And when we talk about copper at this moment, the step forward for 2025 and year ahead, it is about powering industries, then we're talking about driving infrastructure growth, and most important point is that indispensable role in the green energy emission. You know, when we talk about copper, how things have been shaping up over the years, we also talked about copper supply tightness, we talked about copper demand, going forward, how copper market is going to shape in the coming years is very important. We have eminent speakers and panelists to talk about it, and it's very important to look at. In the past, in the year 2024, we have seen copper price being highly volatile, and largely we spoke about the supply tightness of copper, especially from the concentrate side, and eventually we talked about the demand side being impacted. Now the China story has come into play to talk a lot about it, and various factors have been played a role in terms of the copper market. So in this session, we are going to discuss about market dynamics of copper. I'm sure everyone is going to give a perspective about that. And we'll talk about sustainability and green energy demand from copper coming in over the years, which is very, very important point to look at. And another point that we would like to discuss here in this presentation is this technological innovations. So these are the three things that we want to focus here in this session, and I'm sure we're going to get a better perspective at the end of the session to take this forward. The flow of the session is going to be, I'm going to call Ms. Hopkins to give her a thought about the copper market. I'm sure she's going to give us a lot of understanding on how copper market she thinks about it. Post that, I'll make a short presentation on copper demand outlook, and later on we'll start posting our discussions on the panels about the copper market. Please, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here today at this conference, and let me thank first the organizers of IMRC for the invitation and the excellent organization of this event. A special thanks to Mr. Sanjay Mehta, President of the IMRC, and his entire team for their tireless work and commitment to the recycling industry. It has always been a pleasure to come to India and to be here. I've been traveling to India since 30 years, and I must say I love the colors, I love the food, I even love the smell. And I have been able also to witness over the last 30 years, and definitely in the last 10 years, a crazy and remarkable progress of development in the country, which we all admire when looking at India. And particularly impressive is the dynamics that you have going on across the population, also quite young population and a very high number of well-educated professionals. So India, not only from its own market, because there is a huge potential and you have markets always in India, you are very well positioned to take a leading role in the global economy as well. Arubis sees also that future together, as we can make significant progress in the field of recycling and resource innovation. Now, a few words about Arubis. For those that don't know Arubis, we are a German-based company founded in 1866, so we go more than 150 years in the activity of copper. And today we are the leader in multi-metal recycling industry and the biggest copper recycling in the world. With our global smelter network and over 7,000 employees, we develop and implement high technology and sustainable solutions to produce one of the most sustainable copper in the world. What is the copper outlook from a global perspective? The most significant challenge is definitely the high demand for copper. And this demand exceeds the supply of recyclable material as well as primary raw materials. And this trend will definitely continue in the future. As the global economy grows and technological advancement continue, the need for copper increases. Sometimes we say this decade is truly our decade because the demand for copper has never been as high as in this last period. We must find, though, innovative ways to meet this demand. And for recycling, this definitely includes improving recycling processes, increasing the efficiency of copper recovery, and exploring alternative sources of raw materials. Just sometimes in terms of numbers, and we can be super accurate about the number calculations, and there is many statistics about that, but if you just look at current demand, we are around and about 30 million tons. Of that 30 million tons, about 10 million comes purely from recycling. The rest is still coming from the primary raw material side. And if you look at 2040, just by the amount of trends we have currently going on, speaking of decarbonization, green transition, whether it is electrification, e-mobility, whether we talk digitalization, automation, renewables, all of that needs copper, we will need to add another 10 million tons. And logically, this material cannot only come from secondary only, as a lot of the copper already mined before is still in use, and it's also best that it is being kept in use as long as possible. The second biggest challenge for the global outlook is the increasing complexity of materials across the supply chain, and also that needs to be recycled. As products become more advanced, the materials used in their production become more diverse and difficult to separate. And additionally, the lack of standardized recycling processes as well as regulations across different countries poses a significant hurdle. And this inconsistency can lead to inefficiencies in the recycling process and increased costs. So addressing these challenges require a concerted effort from all stakeholders in the industry as well as politicians. At Arubis, we face these challenges with innovation. We develop new technologies for recovering metals from high complex materials. And as you know, there is a lot of discussion today in circular economy where we talk a lot about product design and how product design going forward should be made for easy and simpler recyclability. Always in recycling, we also have to take care not only of what comes to us in the future, but we definitely also have to take care of those materials and products that have once already been produced in the past and what we currently in the present have to recycle. Now, technologies in general enable us to recycle valuable raw materials more efficiently, while at the same time minimizing the environmental impact. For those that know us well, Arubis is positioning itself as an industry leader when it comes to sustainability, which also reflects in our cathode, copper cathode today, which already consists of more than 40% recycled material. And we produce our tons of copper with less than half of the CO2 emissions compared to the average of global competitors. Ladies and gentlemen, successful recycling requires true collaboration and partnership. And at Arubis, we want new partners as well. We want to enter into business relationships also with you here in India as a partner of choice. Why should companies work with us? Very simple. We have a track record of over 50 years in the recycling. We have proven to be reliable. We are sustainable across processes and activities. And we can process complex materials and all sorts of copper-bearing materials. And we set industry standards. We want to work closer also with you together to achieve common goals. This conference provides in that way also an excellent platform to forge new partnerships and strengthen existing ones. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward for further discussions and exchanges with you during this conference.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. I'm sure if I have to summarize her presentation in a very gist, she again emphasized on EV demand. She talks about green energy. She's talking about decarbonization. And eventually, it is the game of supply and demand. And of course, she also spoke about the recycling industry, how things will shape up. So as we progress, I have a short presentation to make for a couple of minutes. And post that, we'll get into the panel and discussion about the other part of the copper market. Can I have my presentation, please? Okay, I've been given 5 minutes. I'm sure each speaker has been given 5 minutes to speak about their markets outlook. And myself is Aurobindo Prasad Gayan, and I'm representing Blue Glance Consulting Private Limited. And here we're going to talk quickly about insights into the copper market trends 2025 and beyond. The objective of using the term beyond because it matters a lot. What we have seen in last 10 years and how the next 1 decade is going to take place is very, very important to look at. And therefore, it is important to get a perspective and understand how copper market is going to look at. So we're going to assess the macroeconomic drivers. We're going to look at the critical themes that are shaping in copper supply and demand going forward in the demand and supply equilibrium of 2025 and ahead. So if I have to just quickly look at this presentation, there are few factors which is being spoken generally every day, everywhere in the market. We talk about macro factors. I'm sure a lot of macro factors being discussed today. US inflation, you are talking about other economic data. So it's all about ambiguous, vulnerable. So I have just sorted it to a very small pointers. If I talk about macro factors for next 1 year or so, then we see ambiguity, vulnerability. And if I talk about copper market trends, of course, looking at the demand projections that we have just spoken about it's all going to look very positive. However, we are not going to see a very linear trend. There are a lot of hurdles going to be seen in copper market. And currently, we are facing a supply constraint. We are a little dicey about how the demand is going to be. And therefore, the trend looks to be very good for copper, but then it's not going to be very linear. And if I talk about largely on the supply-demand balance, tightness to hold, demand wanes is the current theme for 2025. However, it's very important to look at what is our perspective. We feel the decarbonization demand works for copper in the long term. It is, I'm sure, most of us in the panel would have that opinion that decarbonization demand, EV demand, green energy demand are going to play a critical role while we deciphering an outlook on copper for the long run. We have set up themes for future perspective in copper. I'm sure everyone talked about it in the morning session also. It's all about US tariff, monetary policy, and a lot of questions on the Chinese goods tariff to be implemented or not to be implemented remains a question. Of course, we talked about another perspective that the Asian demand or the Eastern demand is going to be very robust, but the question here is that should the Chinese growth trajectory, the growth rate be less than 4.5% in China? A lot of thoughts that is coming into mind when we deciphering an outlook about copper for 2025 and ahead. We are also emphasizing as one of the theme is the emerging markets demand. How is the infrastructure is going to take place? How is the growth is going to be seen? Then we are talking about Chinese influence. That's very, very important to look at it. And the two last point that is very important for copper market is that we need to look at the recessionary and geopolitical risk. Of course, that's going on for the last couple of years now. And if I talk about the global growth rate, it's just at 2.7%. And the question marks remains, should the geopolitical risk is going to subside very soon? Unless we have sorted this point, I'm sure for copper market or for other markets per se, this is going to be a critical theme to look at. The last but not the least and the important point to look at here is the energy transition, the green infrastructure, renewable energy expansion from the sectors like solar, wind and EV demand are going to play a very, very important role for copper market. We have just plotted the demand supply balance sheet forecast for 2025 and 26. I'm sure it's self-explanatory. If you look at 2025 vis-a-vis 2024, the surplus number is shrinking. You know, you look at the refined consumption number, it is also likely to grow over the years. And if you look at the deficit number in 2025 is the trade surplus number, which was 228 lakh tons, is going to reduce to only merely 23 lakh tons. However, the projection shows that in 2026, we might even end up getting into a deficit market for copper. And that's how the reflection will be seen from the primary copper side or the secondary copper demand side. And this is what we wanted to deploy a refined supply demand balance sheet here. Few more slides, last one or two slides which I wanted to talk about it. From our perspective, being a consultant, we give our thought process about how we look at the market. The near-term headwinds definitely going to be there. Risk premium for China tariff is going to be definitely visible, is going to be critical rather. But if we look at from the medium to long-term perspective, it's all about cyclical demand growth. Can we say the V-shaped recovery to take place very soon? I'm sure that's not going to be the point. It's going to be taking a lot of time how the economies are going to shape well. And from medium-term perspective, it's all about supply gaps. So our last take about copper is that the estimated demand for copper from decarbonization is likely to exceed 100% of mine additions. We are all talking about new mine additions to come in. All the new mine additions supply that is going to come in is going to be consumed by the estimated demand from the copper from decarbonization demand. So approximately 85% of cyclical copper demand recovers could bring in from the copper deficit. So that's how we look at it. This is one slide I wanted you to look at it. We generally do our empirical analysis, we do a statistical analysis and build a probability matrix. And we have a base case, bull case and a bear case scenario. But the most efficient one that we are looking at is the base case scenario. So we have supporting factors mentioned and we have broken down into first half of 2025 and second half of 2025. And these are the copper pricing averages that we are looking at for 3 months forward. And that's how the range is looking at. If you look at the first half of 2025, we are already at $9,000+. However, we are just segregating the first half to be around $8,800 because more pain is likely to happen in next couple of months. However, if I look at on the second half of 2025, we are seeing a large jump in the prices and averaging around 9,400. I'm going to post few questions eventually to everyone and get their perspective for the audience here also. So the last takeaways that I wanted to say here in my presentation is that market is going to perceive volatility, better adopt an effective risk policy, which is applicable for primary producers, secondary users, secondary manufacturers. It is going to be applicable for everyone. And the second takeaways would be we are going to focus on large factors from the macro perspective. And the third point that I would comment here is the supply will determine the trend amid flattish cyclical demand. So the last point about our presentation is that decarbonization is the key to long-term trend for copper. I'm sure that's the view that most of us would have in the copper market outlook. So that's about a small presentation I wanted to throw, and we'll continue to discuss about copper market, and we have a few set of questions that I'm set up here. So I have four eminent panelists here, and I have framed around 7 to 8 questions, and I'm going to ask them. I'm sure their answers is going to give us a lot of perspective how they are looking at it. So my first question to Mr. Devinder Surana would be, since he is into the business for several years and he manages the copper business of Bhagyanagar Copper Private Limited. And my first question to you, sir, would be, what steps are being taken by copper alloy industry in India to improve sustainability, including recycling particles and reduction carbon emissions?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me. As has been already said, the first step towards sustainability in the copper industry is to increase the amount of copper scrap which we can use in manufacturing of copper semis. As has already been said once, but it is worth repeating, that the carbon footprint for virgin copper is roughly 3.7 kgs per copper used. Whereas if we use copper scrap, it is only 0.7. So I think that is one of the biggest things which we can do in terms of sustainability of use of copper. Secondly, similarly, energy consumption when we use secondary copper or scrap copper is almost 1/4 of that of primary copper. Thirdly, one of the biggest advantages of copper, and that is the reason it is the oldest material found in India, in the world, even before steel or any other metal, is that it's easiest to use material, and 94% of the metal which is used can be recycled, and absolutely no loss of properties in any which way when material is recycled. I think these are the various things which help in the efficiency of and reducing the carbon footprint. Further, over the years, technology used in recycling has gone through the roof, and I think we are way much cleaner. Most of the people who recycle are using either electricity or gas, so there are absolutely no emissions when we use copper scrap. And I think these are the few things which the entire industry is doing. We at Bhagyanagar Copper run a very integrated unit which starts all the way from residues and ashes to manufacture of auto components, which are all happening under one roof. So that reduces the carbon footprint further and makes efficiency much more. Also, almost all the recyclers, especially the big recyclers, are also very good at recycling all the other waste which comes with copper, like plastics and others, and that helps us further reduce the carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Devinder Suran, sir. And I'm now going to question to Ms. Hopkins. She's talked about EV demand, she talked about decarbonization. So I have a question for you, ma'am. How does the anticipated copper demand from decarbonization compare to the existing supply and potential new mine additions projected for 2025? Of course, I did speak a little about my presentations, but we would like to hear from you how you think about it.
Yeah, I think when I said that we need about 10 million tons more by 2040, then definitely more than 80% is accounting only for the whole wave when it comes down to decarbonization. It depends a bit on which kind of definition of that one you use, but definitely the whole of the e-mobility wave is all related to decarbonization. And as well as the renewables industry, or the renewables energy, sorry, for everything that is solar and windmills and so on. If you take that part of the equation, then you need to also adopt all of the electricity grids in order to enable that type of energy to float through the system and to float into, or to connect that type of industry also to the effective user of the energy. So all in all, the whole demand actually kind of one could say is mainly driven by the whole decarbonization exercise. I think the other portion, and that's maybe a very interesting one with what happened this week indeed in the area of AI and open AI topics. Data centers are needed for AI technologies. It's all part of digitalization and automation and what have you, which we all like today to also have that, let's say, part of the comfort and convenience topics happening. But at the same time, all this requires also a huge amount of energy, but it also requires a huge invest in terms of setting up data centers to support all those potential. And when one looks at the picture of what does that mean then in terms of copper usage, that might have also in itself a very big impact, but we'll see how the story continues in the weeks ahead, whether yes or no all of the data centers are needed. But it's definitely next to the decarbonization, I think one of the major drivers where we see copper demand effectively boosting about.
Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone would think about that decarbonization demand is going to play a very important role. I'll have a different question to Mr. Kamlesh Jain ji. Kamlesh sir, you have been into this business for, especially into copper cable recycling business for about 5 decades now. And what numbers that we get to see is that your capacity falls around 7,000 metric tons per month. So could you please share your growth story, how has evolved, and provide us some insights into how India's scrap market is expected to evolve over the next 1 decade?
Good afternoon. Thanks, Arvind. So I will go back to certain years back when in 2018, when China has banned the import of the cables and various other scrap. In those days, China was having almost like a monopoly of world over, globally sourcing all the scrap for recycling. And tremendous progress China has made in recycling. Then when I get this news in those days, and then I travel to China and I've seen the magnitude, level of cable recycling happening in China is phenomenal. And I'm surprised that those waste plastic coming from the cables, and they were able to segregate, and they were able to make different granules by compounding the plastics. It's completely circular, completely sustainable. And that's why I feel China is making the cheaper product because of the recycling, and they're making copper cathodes, copper wire rods, all virgin spec, and they were LAB registered brand. So I have seen a very big gap. When China is going to stop this, then the world is going to have another big spot. So we quickly moved, and then we immediately put the plant, and we were advantage of first movers, and we put the whole plant with the latest technologies. And we keep evolving ourselves by putting new technologies, and we also put a plastic plant along with this cable recycling, because plastic recycling in China is very in closed loop. Not many people knows this. So we have find very tough period to get these technologies from China, and then we put this plant, and then we made those granules. No one wants to buy in India because it is first time it is manufactured in India. Then we developed the market. We pursued the plastic manufacturer to use these granules, and they also give suggestions. So we developed the product for them. It's got a tremendous exercise to they built the recycling plant of this cable, copper lead cable, copper aluminum cable, ICW, different grades of cable. Almost we do 40 varieties of cable, and we sort around at least 60 varieties of plastics, stripping granules, and then we get different metals which we refine to the value-added product like copper billets, copper granules, and we are going for the expansion for copper cathodes and different other products. Be going for that. I feel it's a tremendous sustainable model of copper cables, which is completely 100% recycling, zero landfill, zero burning, zero waste of plastic. So it is completely, and is one of the most, important metal for humanity to survive in this planet. So that's what our growth. We have, of course, some challenges now facing. So the Europe has banned completely.
Yeah.
And today I was reading one of the gentlemen in Europe was telling me about this OECD country issues. So Europe is saying that export to not even forget the cables and all, even the pure scrap, they are saying that it should not go to OECD country, that they are raising now. So apart from, we have big challenges going to come. I think my other questions will reply that, but we have big challenges now to source the recyclable material, especially from the, so we don't have from Far East, we don't have from Middle East, Africa is doing their own recycling in a big way now, and Europe is not allowing to send the material to India. So leftover is US. The freight cost of West Coast to India is unbelievable, not workable. And in short, in the near term, you see the Malaysia and Thailand and other country came very quickly. Chinese people went to these countries, Malaysia and Thailand, and they have built big capacities, phenomenal capacities, and they are more freight competent to the Indian markets. So they are able to get the major share of the recyclable material from US and other ports in the world. So we have tough challenge in sourcing the material, but somehow we are making better value added product to be a longer value chain to sustain in this line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sure the next question that I'm going to ask you eventually about is how are you going to look at it. That question remains later for you, but I'll come to Mr. Jinesha. He's into brass business, and when we talk about brass business, it's all about, again, copper and zinc. So, sir, I have a question for you. With India's brass production, which is estimated to be around 0.5 to 0.6 million tons per year, including both primary and secondary recycled metals, how do you foresee the performance of brass market for at least next 5 years?
Yeah. Thank you for this question. According to me, next 5 years will become very crucial for new generation demand for various reasons. Now, Indian mentality is gradually shifting from saving to spending. Indian consumption pattern are becoming higher and higher. Previously, we were buying and using for so many years. Now, within 2 to 5 years, we are mentally prepared for replace that. That means next 5 years will be the boom for brass products. Plus, Government of India is now acting very proactively to various problems faced by secondary copper industries, particularly brass industries. Government is aligning their policy within requirement of industries and in support of industries. Indian government's policy, PLI, Make in India, and acceptance over globe, our Indian products are very much becoming acceptable. All these reasons will lead to higher demand at a rapid pace within 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you for the quick answer, sir. I'll come back to Devinder Surana, sir, on the question now. I have one last question for you. So I have already asked one question, so I have one question for you, is that how can India ensure the security of copper supply? It's a macro question to meet the growing demand for critical infrastructure and energy transitions while mitigating risk from geopolitical and trade uncertainties.
Thank you. I think Kamlesh answered a few parts of that question. As has been already mentioned, demand for copper is going to go through the roof for green energy, EV and AI. We in India, unfortunately, don't have any supply of copper. We have only 5% of our requirement in the form of ore. Everything else, 95% of our material needs to be imported. So it's very critical that we ensure our supply of copper in whichever form we want to, whether it's concentrate or scrap or whatever. And unfortunately, even today, only 30% of our requirement of scrap is being met through imports, especially because of the incidence of customs duty, as against 80% of the requirement in aluminum. So what are the challenges that we are facing? In addition to what Kamlesh has already mentioned, the biggest problem is because of the shortage of concentrate supply, the TCRC for conversion of concentrate into cathode is at an all-time low. Today we have a situation where cathode is actually, concentrate is actually costlier than scrap. It's only because of the customs duty that it's not being used so much. We have a challenge from EU that material is going to get banned. UK has already banned supply of all cables into India. US, we are not able to source because there is a crazy arbitrage between COMEX and the LME. So it's becoming that we are being put into a corner in terms of sourcing of material. So we as a group of importers, we as a group of users, as a country need to put our act together to ensure that we are able to get our copper supply well in position. I think these are the things which need to be done and need to look at it. We are going to face a very tight market for copper supply, both in terms of concentrate as well as scrap. We are prepared for it, and with the technology and the scale which all of us are operating, I'm sure that we'll be able to meet the challenge and get from whatever sources we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure he's already talking about tightness in the market, and my question to Ms. Hopkins is that I had a question to her about decarbonization. Now, my another question to you is about cyclical consumption along with decarbonization demand. Are we going to see copper really going to be very tight in 2025, 26, 27? A very straightforward question to you, ma'am.
I don't have all the answers for that, definitely not as a single company, but what is clear is as demand is so much as a driver now, I think the capacities of getting all those demands turned into copper, what is needed for the industry, are currently there around. We have quite some capacities across the world that are not being used entirely, so there is a place to get it quickly to the market. Maybe some words on that one later on, also on the recycling part. But when it comes to primary, all the time when demand is there, the market has to be resetting itself. As you said, TCRCs are super low today because of that capacities, smelting capacities being around, and everybody wants the capacities to be filled. So logically, you've got this very big competition going on the demanding side for that one, and mines can maybe not catch up entirely, or also want to participate in the good economic situations, and that normally always balances out by the price setting. So remains to see how copper price will react to that one as a whole, because it needs to be also sustainable in order to be able to process the concentrates in the refining, in the smelting capacities, needs to remain a sustainable business model. If that is no longer the case, then some might phase out, and then automatically the markets will rebalance. So that has also been happening in the past. It may be tough for now, but we'll see how that needs to go. When it comes in terms of recycling, I'm absolutely with all of you. We should recycle at max what we can do, but also there is a limit to it. We have a lot of copper in use, which will only be ready for recycling once it really comes to end of life. We are not gonna recycling for the sake of recycling. So definitely there is some time for quite some material in use that we can't get at yet. And I think there is a lot of discussions around recycled content. Should it be there, and how much should it be there, and what is the right percentage in products? And I think we're making a bit of a mistake to put really clear-cut percentages on that one, because from the history and the experience that we have, in the market, you see that actually all copper units that can get recycled are getting to the market just because of its value. Copper is a very mature market, as you said. It's also recyclable endlessly without a loss of quality. And as a consequence, it does get recycled. The only thing where it maybe hampers, or what could be very different, is the collection rate. Definitely there is a huge effort that can be done in terms of getting the material collected in the right place, so it gets to the right places to be recycled on one hand, and maybe the speed with which those potential units that are somewhere end of life, unused, can come to the market. So it's both the collection rates that can still be increased across the globe, everywhere. I think Europe is well advanced there, but also Europe can still improve there. But it's mainly also the speed with which, once it gets collected, it gets actually back through the supply chain to be fed back into the industry.
Thank you, thank you. What I could summarize here is that she briefly says that you have to recycle fast and more and make the supplies better available. I have one question to Kamlesh Jain ji about recycling. One last question to you, sir. She spoke about the largely on the global side. One question to you pertaining to Indian market. What is the future of recycling industry and how Indian companies can survive in the current scenario? When I talk about current scenario, I'm sure how tight it is that you know. So you probably can give us a perspective at the current scenario, how the recycling industry should look at in terms of managing and growing the industry.
So I feel the recycling is, of course, we have tough situation, we have challenges. And it's not about copper alone, it is about the overall base metal, where you see the lead, copper or aluminium. So we are in many base metal, and let's take example of some metals. There is no, the restriction on the transboundary movement of the scrap, like lead. The batteries are banned by many countries. You can't move the scrap, so we have challenges in sourcing the lead batteries. One of the major factor for India, the negative side, is OECD issues. India is not a part of OECD, so US, which is one of the largest garbage creator and scrap creator, and we could not buy many scrap from US because of the OECD issues. And the copper and other metals, of course, the transboundary movement is free, but sometimes the freight cost kills us. Sometimes the country which are under FTA, the countries which are very, like especially India, every countries are now trying to protect their resources. It is no more a scrap now. It is for them, it's a recyclable resources which they want to protect and don't want to send to other countries. So you see every country is putting the facility, promoting the recycling, and that is why we were depending on the scrap to come, but nowadays we are having huge challenges. Of course, the government can help a lot, which I don't want to again say GSTs, local issues of GST, the organized sector. The unorganized sector scrap is not coming to organized sector, and because of that we don't compete. The local laws of GSTs are not supporting to recycling in India. OECD issues we have. But if you see the positive side, yes, we have now EPR scheme is coming, they can help us. And the government can reduce the duties on this scrap, that can help us. But one thing is for that, if we want to be sustained in recycling or depending on import, it will be big challenges. We have to do our own urban mining, we have to do our own countries recycling in a proper way. If you depend on the overseas, it will be a challenge for us to have more growth in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one last question to Mr. Jinesha, and then probably if audiences have any questions, they can put it. Sir, you are into brass business, and technically or directly, indirectly, you are exposed to copper and zinc.
Yeah.
So my question is that, given the current environment where copper is supply tightness story and zinc, we are talking about probably a likely higher supply coming in.
Yeah.
So both the commodities are not in sync, and you are into brass business. How are you going to manage your volatility of your business coming out of this to raw material for your brass business?
Yeah. Nowadays, metals are facing high volatility. to eliminate that, we have two options. Either we can go back to back buy and sell, or if it is not possible because of high value material, and every time it may not be possible, for the outcome of that situation, there are various hedging tools are available. Though that is not completely protecting you from volatility, but getting major relief from volatility. Yesterday, we have observed 3-4% COMEX was up, while 3-4% LME was down.
Yeah.
This is rare happening event.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
We cannot 100% fully protect from hedge, but usually our brass business is doing on percentage basis, say about 60 to 65% of copper LME. When we are hedging 60% of our brass purchase, 60% copper hedging, that is covers 80-90% our volatility. That is the best tool available right now. Plus volatility remain in availability, right? Just like Kamlesh ji said, procurement of scrap it will be a big challenge. For that we have to be protected from price volatility, and hedge tool is, according to me, is the best tool to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving your insights. I have so much of questions to the panelists. Do we have any questions from the audience side? I think it's about to be a lunch time, so I'll close it. I would like to request Mr. Dinesh Shah to come over here and give his vote of thanks to everyone.
We are very much thankful Team MRAI to give us this opportunity to discuss very well hot topic of procurement of copper, volatility of copper and thing. We are thankful to all panelists who have invested their valuable time. We are thankful to all in front of us to listen us carefully. Thank you. Thank you very much. मैं रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ सुजीत समादार सर, उल्लास पर्लिकर जी, आप पधारें और पैनलिस्ट को फैसिलिटेट करें. थैंक यू.